Hey everyone! So in the previous video, we've gone through basic printing methods in Ruby. In this video, we'll be looking at conditional statements, some if and else statements. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate using conditional statements for a simple height checker for, let's say, a roller coaster ride. So I'm going to start by making a new file. I'm going to save this file as, let's say, conditional.rb. And I'm going to make a new variable. I'm going to say set a minimum height of 160 centimeters. So the person has to be taller than 160 centimeters to be able to ride the roller coaster. So let's say my height is 150, so I'll type that in. 50. So let's start by making my if statement. If I am taller than the minimum height, let's say if I'm less than the minimum height, which in this case is true, I should not be able to ride, so I'm going to print you're not tall enough to ride. Now let's make another statement, else if my height is more than the minimum, if I'm taller than the minimum height, then I should be able to ride, so I'm going to print enjoy the ride. Now let's make the last statement else. So this is what happens if the first and the second condition is not satisfied. So I'm not shorter and not taller than the minimum height, therefore I'm equal to the minimum height. I want to redirect them to an age checker. So if my height is exactly the minimum height, I want to be older than 18 or older to be able to ride. So I will go to age checker website, and then we can finish our statements. Now let's try to run this code. Let's open our terminal. I'm already in the directory, so I'm going to run conditional.rb. You're not tall enough to ride. I am shorter than the minimum height, so I'm not tall enough to ride. Now let's set this to 170. Let's say I am taller than the minimum height. Now let's try to run the code. Enjoy the ride. If I am exactly 160 centimeters, I run this code, it redirects me to an age checker website and make sure that I'm over 17 of age to be able to ride. So this is one way of writing a conditional statement. There are variations to this, depends on your need. So let's say we can add extra else if statements. For instance, there's a maximum height of, let's make it 200. So I'm going to add another statement here. Why do I write the maximum height above of the minimum height? I'll show you why in a few minutes. Let's say you're too tall to ride this time. Now let's set my height to 210 and let's run our code. So you're too tall to ride. Oops, sorry. Now, why is it important to put this before the minimum statement? I'll show you what happens if I switch their order around. It says enjoy the ride. Why? I'm taller than 200 centimeters. I should not be able to ride. So this is because the way this is executed is in order. So I start from the very first condition. If this is true, I run this and I stop checking for everything else. If this is wrong, then I'll check for the rest, for the other conditions. It keeps checking until I get to the correct statement. That's why it's important to prioritize. We want this to go after the maximum. Therefore, we'll run this code again. We should get you're too tall to ride. So let's try another structure of writing if statements. And that is using multiple if blocks. I'm going to show you what happens if I do this. So in this case, it would be else. It would be if my height is equal to the minimum. Okay, so let's save this and let's try to run this and I'll show you what happens. So I'm getting two outputs. Why is that? So that happens because using multiple if blocks means it checks for every condition. When we use else if, it checks only up to the correct expression, and then it stops checking for everything else. Which is why, in this case, we prefer using else if statements. However, there are circumstances where you might need to use multiple if blocks. That is when one or more of the conditions can be true at a time. However, in our situation, we only want one of these conditions to be true, so we use else if statements. Another important thing is nested if statements, which is having an if statement instead of another if statement. So if I have, let's say, I'm going to break down this age checker, so I'm going to make a new variable. Let's call it your age. Let's say I'm 18 years old. So if I go to my else statement and I make another if my age is greater than 17, if I'm older than 17, then I should be able to ride. So I'm going to write puts enjoy the ride. Otherwise, you're too young to ride. Sometimes when you only need two statements, you don't actually need else if, you only need if and then else. So you can set looking like this, and this is end of every if statement. So if you have an if, you always close with an end. So this is what my structure looks like now. Let me change my height to 160, and this time my age is 18. Let's try to run this code. Enjoy the ride, because I am older than 17, so I should be able to ride. Now let's change this to 17. So if I am 17 years old and my height is 160, I should not be able to ride. It's too young to ride. So that's it for this video. I hope that makes sense. Thank you very much for listening. Leave your feedback in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next video.